The message came at 3 in the morning when most of the crew was sleeping. Captain Park Doyen was sitting alone in his room, reading old letters from his wife, when his communication device started beeping. He picked it up and saw the red warning light that meant urgent military news. His fingers felt cold as he opened the file. The words on the screen made no sense at first. He read them again. Then again. Then he sat very still for a long time. The Velrath had killed all the human prisoners. Every single one. 2,400 women. Doctors, nurses, engineers, pilots. They had lined them up in a public square on their homeworld and shot them one by one while cameras broadcast the killing to 6 different star systems. Park Doyen felt something break inside his chest. His younger sister had been on that list. She was a medical officer who had surrendered with her team to protect wounded soldiers who could not run. She had believed the Velrath would follow the rules of war. She had believed that surrender meant safety. She had been wrong. The captain walked to his bridge with slow, heavy steps. His crew was already there. Someone had woken them. Navigator Kim Yoon-ji was crying quietly at her station, but her hands were steady on the controls. Weapons Officer Wang Taesung was staring at his screens with empty eyes. Communications Officer Lee Sora was listening to reports from other ships, her face pale as paper. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say. The main screen lit up, and Admiral Baek Sunho appeared. He was an old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. Everyone in the fleet knew him as a patient leader who always chose peace when possible. He had stopped 3 wars through talking instead of fighting. He believed in mercy and second chances, but the man on the screen did not look patient. His eyes were hard and cold, like stones at the bottom of a frozen river. "You've all seen the reports," he said. His voice was flat and calm, which somehow made it more frightening than shouting. "For 18 months we have fought this war with honor. We treated their wounded in our hospitals. We fed their prisoners good food. We followed every rule. We showed them that humans could be trusted." He paused and took a slow breath. "They answered our kindness by murdering 2,400 of our daughters and sisters and mothers. Medical workers who had surrendered to save lives. Women who trusted that the enemy would act with basic decency." Park Doyen watched his admiral carefully. He had never seen the old man look like this. "I've spent my whole life believing that mercy makes us strong," Admiral Baek continued. "I have argued against revenge. I have counseled patience. I have trusted that even enemies can become friends if we show them goodness." His jaw tightened. "I was a fool. Some enemies do not deserve mercy. Some enemies only understand one language, and today we will speak that language." The Admiral leaned forward toward the camera. "Operation Silent Fury is now active. All restrictions on weapons and tactics are removed. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot is free to use whatever means necessary. We will no longer fight with one hand tied behind our backs. We will no longer worry about being fair to an enemy that murdered helpless prisoners for entertainment." Kim Yoon-ji made a small sound. She had lost her best friend in the massacre. The 2 women had grown up together on the same colony, had joined the fleet together, had promised to be aunts to each other's children someday. "To the Velrath," Admiral Baek said, his voice dropping even lower, "you have made a terrible mistake. You thought killing our women would frighten us into surrender? You thought we would beg for peace. Instead, you have done something far worse. You have shown us that you cannot be reasoned with. You have shown us that you will never honor any agreement. You have shown us that the only way to be safe from you is to make sure you can never threaten anyone again." He stood straight and put his hands behind his back. "You wanted to see what humans are truly capable of? You will get your wish. May your gods have mercy on you, because we will not." The screen went dark. For a long moment, nobody on the bridge moved. Then Hwang Tae-sun spoke in a rough voice. "Sir, what are your orders?" Captain Park looked at his crew. These people had served with him for 3 years. They had followed rules and shown restraint even when it was hard. They had watched friends die and still refused to cross certain lines. Those lines no longer existed. "Set course for the Velrath home system," Park said quietly. "Maximum speed." Kim Yoon-ji entered the coordinates with shaking hands. The ship hummed as its engines powered up. "Sir," Lisora said, "I am receiving messages from the other ships. Every captain in the fleet is saying the same thing. They are all heading for Velrith space." Park nodded slowly. Of course they were. Every person in the fleet knew someone on that list. Every person had watched the broadcast. Every person had seen their friends and family members die while the Velrath soldiers laughed and cheered. The Velrath had 4,000 years of history. They had conquered dozens of species. They believed they were the strongest power in this part of the galaxy. They had never fought humans who had nothing left to lose. Park. Doyen pulled up a picture on his personal screen. His sister smiled back at him, young and bright and full of hope. She had joined the medical corps because she wanted to help people. She had treated wounded Velrath soldiers with the same care she gave to humans. "I am sorry," he whispered to her picture. "I am sorry we could not protect you. But I promise you this. They will pay for what they did. They will pay in ways they cannot imagine. And when it is over, the whole galaxy will remember what happens when you hurt the people we love." He put the picture away and turned to face the stars. The war had changed. Everything had changed, and the Velrath had no idea what was coming for them. The Velrath High Commander sat in his throne room and waited for the human attack. He was not worried. His species had ruled this part of space for 4,000 years. They had crushed every enemy that dared to challenge them. The humans were soft and weak, too concerned with rules and fairness. Killing their prisoners had been easy. Breaking their spirit would be easier. 800 warships formed a wall around the Velrath home system, the largest fleet ever assembled in their history. Behind them sat defense stations, weapons platforms, and millions of soldiers ready to fight. The High Commander had prepared for everything, or so he thought. Commander. Choi Mai-Rei watched the enemy fleet from her small scout ship hidden behind a distant moon. She was a thin woman with short black hair and calm dark eyes. Before the war, she had been an engineer who designed farming equipment. Now she commanded the first wave of humanity's revenge. "Are the packages ready?" she asked her team. "Yes, Commander." 10 million units standing by. Choi Mai-Rei nodded slowly. The packages were drones. Tiny machines, no bigger than a human fist. Humanity had built them years ago, but never used them because they were considered too cruel for honorable warfare. They attacked without warning, without mercy. Without any chance for the enemy to surrender, the rules had protected the Velrath from these weapons. The Velrath had ended the rules. "Release them all," Choi Mai-Rei said quietly. 10 million drones poured out from hidden locations across the system. They moved in perfect silence through the darkness of space. The Velrath fleet detected them too late. Their weapons could not track targets so small and so fast. The drones flew past the warships like water flowing around rocks. They were not interested in the military. The drones headed straight for the Velrath homeworld. They hit power stations and water treatment plants. They destroyed communication towers and food storage buildings. They tore apart the machines that kept the air clean and fresh. Within 6 hours, the most advanced planet in the Velrath Empire went completely dark. Billions of Velrath citizens woke up to find their lights dead. Their water stopped, their air growing stale. Panic spread through the cities like fire through dry grass. On the colony world of Velthor Prime, General Ojisu led the ground attack. She was a small woman who walked with a slight limp from an old injury. Her daughter had been a pilot on the prisoner transport. She had watched the execution broadcast 17 times, memorizing every detail of her child's final moments. "Deploy the silence protocol," she ordered. Her soldiers hesitated. The silence protocol was a weapon humanity had banned 200 years ago. It used tiny machines that entered the body and attacked the brain. The victims did not die. They simply lost all control of their muscles. They could not move or speak or even blink. But they remained fully awake and aware, trapped inside bodies that no longer obeyed them. "General," one soldier said carefully, "this weapon was forbidden for good reason. It is considered one of the cruelest things ever invented."
Oh.
General Lo looked at him with empty eyes. "I shot my daughter while she was on her knees begging for her life. They laughed while they did it. They broadcast her death to entertain their citizens. Her voice did not shake. It was perfectly steady, which made it somehow worse. Deploy the protocol. The soldier swallowed hard and followed orders. Within days, the Valrath military on Velther Prime simply stopped functioning. Soldiers froze in place like statues. Officers collapsed at their desks. Pilots sat motionless in their ships. All of them still alive, still thinking, still feeling. Just unable to do anything about it, Captain Kong Wujin flew his ship directly into Velrath, communication range, and broadcast a message on every channel. "You killed our women to show your strength," he said. His voice was cold and hard. "You wanted to prove that the Velrath were powerful and humans were weak. You wanted to frighten us? You wanted to break us?" He paused. "Instead, you have awakened something you do not understand. For 18 months, we held back. We followed rules that protected you. We treated your people with kindness you did not deserve. That was a choice we made because we believed in mercy." His next words came out slow and clear. "We do not believe in mercy anymore. You took that from us when you murdered 2,400 innocent women. Now you will see what humans become when we stop pretending to be civilized, and you will pray for a death that will never come." The Velrath ambassador tried to contact Admiral Beak. He sent message after message begging for talks, for negotiation, for any chance to end this nightmare. Admiral Beak did not respond. They had 18 months to choose peace, the old admiral said to his staff. They chose murder instead. Now they will live with the results. His aide looked worried. "Sir, the Galactic Council is demanding that we stop. They say we are going too far." Admiral Beak laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was the sound of a man who had lost something precious and would never get it back. "The Council said nothing when our women were killed. They watched and waited to see who would win. They offered no help, no support, no justice." He shook his head slowly. "They made their choice. Now we make ours. Tell the Council that humanity is no longer interested in their opinions." The human fleet continued its advance. The Velrath Empire that had stood for 4,000 years began to crumble. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, spirits of 2,400 murdered. Women watched as their deaths were finally answered. This was just the beginning. Dr. Shin Yuri had spent her whole life studying alien species. She loved learning about different creatures, understanding how they lived and breathed and thought. Before the war, she had written papers about building friendship between humans and other species. She believed that all intelligent life could find common ground. Then she watched her students die in the massacre broadcast. 7 young women she had trained personally. Girls who had come to her with dreams of exploring the universe and making friends among the stars. The Velrath had shot them like animals while the crowd cheered. Something inside Dr. Shin changed that day. Her love of alien life turned into something darker. Her knowledge became a weapon. Now she led a research team with one mission. Find every weakness the Velrath had. Use those weaknesses to hurt them in ways they could not defend against. "What have you found?" Admiral Beak asked during their meeting. Dr. Shin pulled up her research on the main screen. Her hands were steady and her voice was calm. Only her eyes showed the fire burning inside her. "The Velrath have a unique biology," she explained. "They can only reproduce during certain seasons when their atmosphere reaches a specific condition. Without that condition, their bodies simply cannot create children." Admiral Beak listened carefully. "Go on." "My team has developed a compound that changes the atmosphere permanently. Once released on a planet, it will make reproduction impossible for any Velrath living there. They will not die. Their current generation will live full lives, but they will have no children, no grandchildren, no future." The room went very quiet. "You were talking about ending their species," one officer said slowly. Dr. Shin turned to look at him. "I am talking about making sure they can never do this to anyone else. In 3 generations, there will be no more Velrath, no more massacres, no more murdered prisoners. The galaxy will be safe from them forever." Admiral Beak sat back in his chair and thought for a long time. This was a line that could never be uncrossed. Once they did this, humanity would carry the weight of it forever. He thought about Lieutenant Commander Yoon Haina, who had surrendered to save her patients. He thought about all the nurses and doctors who had trusted that the enemy would show basic human decency. He thought about how wrong they had been. "Do it," he said quietly. Lieutenant No Sung-woo volunteered to fly the delivery mission. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke and never smiled anymore. His wife had been one of the executed prisoners. She was a nurse who had stayed behind to care for soldiers, too wounded to move. She had believed the Velrath would respect medical workers. The last image Fang-woo had of her was from the execution broadcast. She had been crying, but she stood straight and proud even at the end. She had died with more courage than her killers would ever understand. Song-woo flew his ship alone. He wanted no one else to share the weight of what he was about to do. The compound sat in containers behind him, enough to poison for entire worlds. Not military targets. Agricultural worlds, places where the Velrath grew food and raised families. Places full of innocent civilians who had never held a weapon. For one moment, Song-woo hesitated. These people had not personally killed his wife. Many of them probably had no idea what their government had done. Children lived on these worlds. Children who had never hurt anyone. Then he remembered how his wife had begged for her life. How the Velrath soldiers had laughed. How the crowd had celebrated like they were watching entertainment. Those crowds had come from worlds just like these. Those soldiers had grown up in places just like these. This whole civilization had created the monsters who murdered his wife. He released the compound. On the Galactic Council station, representatives from 17 different species gathered to condemn humanity. They wrote a formal declaration calling the human actions crimes against all intelligent life. They demanded immediate surrender and punishment for human leaders. Counselor Bae Ju-woo represented humanity at the meeting. She was an older woman with gray hair and a face lined with grief. Her granddaughter had been among the executed. She stood before the council and read their declaration carefully. Then she looked up at the assembled aliens with eyes like frozen steel. "You speak of crimes against life," she said slowly. "You condemn us for defending ourselves. You demand punishment for our leaders." She set the declaration down on the table. Where was this outrage when our women were murdered? Where were your declarations when 2,400 prisoners were shot for entertainment? Where was your demand for justice then? The council chamber went silent. "You said nothing," Counselor Bae continued. "You watched the massacre broadcast just like everyone else. You saw our daughters die, and you waited. You wanted to see who would win before you picked a side." She picked up the declaration and tore it in half. "Humanity withdraws from this council. We do not recognize your authority. We do not want your friendship. And we will never forget that when we needed allies." You offered nothing but silence. She walked out of the chamber without looking back. The door closed behind her with a sound like a tomb ceiling shut. Humanity stood alone now. But they did not care. They'd already lost everything that mattered. The only thing left was making sure the Velrath paid the full price, and that price was still being counted. The Velrath Empire had stood for 4,000 years. It fell in 7 months. Major Yu Hajin led her soldiers through the burning streets of the Velroth capital city. She was a tall woman with a scar across her left cheek from an old battle. Her boots crunched on broken glass and fallen stones. Smoke rose from buildings all around her. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the empty streets. The Velrath had never seen anything like this. Their empire had conquered dozens of species over thousands of years. They had always won. They had always been the strongest. They had never faced an enemy with nothing left to lose. "Contact ahead," one of her soldiers reported. "Velroth unit, approximately 50 fighters. They are holding position near the government building." "Major," you raised her hand to stop her team. She studied the enemy position through her scope. The Velrath soldiers looked tired and scared. Their weapons were outdated, and their armor was damaged. They had been fighting without sleep for days. "Give them one chance," she said. "Broadcast the surrender offer." Her communications officer sent the message in the Velrath language. "Surrender now, and you will be treated fairly. Resist and you will be destroyed. The choice is yours." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the Velrath soldiers began putting down their weapons. One by one, they raised their hands and walked toward the human lines. Some of them were crying. Some of them could barely stand. Major, you watched them approach with complicated feelings. Part of her wanted to kill them all. Part of her remembered why she had become a soldier in the first place. To protect people. To do the right thing, process them according to the rules, she ordered. Food, water, medical care, no abuse. Her soldiers looked surprised. After everything the Velrath had done, they had expected their commander to demand blood. But Major, you had a different plan. A crueler plan in some ways. The prisoners were taken to a holding area where they received exactly the treatment. Major, you had promised. Warm food, clean water, doctors for the wounded, beds to sleep in, guards who did not beat them or insult them. And each prisoner received a message translated into their language. This is how we treated your people before your government murdered our women. This is the kindness we showed you for 18 months. We fed your wounded. We healed your sick. We followed rules designed to protect everyone, including your people. Your leaders repaid this kindness by executing 2,400 prisoners who had surrendered in good faith. Remember this. Tell your children. Tell your grandchildren. Humanity was willing to be your friend. Your leaders chose to make us your destroyers instead. The effect was devastating. Velrath soldiers who had been told that humans were monsters found themselves treated with respect and care. They saw with their own eyes that everything their government had told them was a lie. The humans were not cruel by nature. They had become cruel because the Velrath had given them no other choice. Word spread through the remaining Velrath military. Soldiers began surrendering in waves. Not because they were afraid of death, but because they were ashamed of what their leaders had done. They fell to their knees and begged human soldiers to explain why their government had started a war they could never win. Sergeant Im Dong-hwa found himself guarding a special prisoner. This Velrath soldier had been part of the execution detail. He had personally killed 17 human women. His name was on the list that every human soldier had memorized. Dong-hwa's daughter had been one of those. 17 women. He stood outside the prisoner's cell for a long time. His weapon hung at his side. No one would stop him if he decided to use it. No one would blame him. Everyone would understand. The Velrath looked up at him with terrified eyes. He knew exactly who Dong-hwa was. He had seen the name tag and recognized it from the execution list. You killed my daughter, Dong-hwa said quietly. She was 23 years old. She wanted to be a teacher after the war. She had just gotten engaged to a boy back home. Velrath started shaking. He opened his mouth to beg for mercy, but no words came out. Dong-hwa pulled up a chair and sat down across from the prisoner. Their eyes met through the bars. I am not going to kill you, he said. I thought about it. I dreamed about it. Every night since I watched her die, I have imagined putting a bullet in your head. The Velrath looked confused and hopeful at the same time. But killing you would be too easy, Dong-hwa continued. You would die quickly. The pain would end. You would escape justice. He leaned forward. Instead, you are going to live. You are going to grow old in a prison cell. And every single day for the rest of your long life, you are going to remember what you did. You are going to see the faces of the women you murdered every time you close your eyes. You are going to hear their screams every time the room goes quiet. And you are going to know that your entire civilization fell because of what you and your kind chose to do. Tears started rolling down the Velrath's face. My daughter believed in mercy, Dong-hwa said, his voice cracking for the first time. She treated your wounded soldiers with kindness, even though they were enemies. She died believing that good people should show compassion even in war. He stood up slowly. I am honoring her memory by letting you live. Not because you deserve it, but because she would have wanted me to be better than you. I hope her ghost haunts your dreams forever. He walked away without looking back. Behind him, the Velrath prisoner collapsed to the floor and wept like a child. The weight of what his people had done, finally crushing him completely. This was humanity's greatest weapon. Not guns or bombs or drones, but the ability to show their enemies exactly what they had destroyed Exactly what they had thrown away. The Valrath had killed 2,400 angels of mercy, and now they had to live with the demons they had created instead. The surrender ceremony was held exactly 1 year after the massacre. Humanity had chosen the date on purpose. They wanted the Valrath to remember this day forever. The location was the same plaza, where 2,400 women had been executed. The stones had been cleaned, but everyone present could still feel the ghosts of the dead watching from somewhere just beyond sight. Admiral Beek's host stood on a raised platform waiting for the Valrath leaders to approach. He looked older than he had a year ago. The war had aged him in ways that went beyond simple time. His hair was completely white now, and deep lines marked his face, but his eyes were clear and steady. The Valrath High Commander walked toward the platform with slow, heavy steps. He had been the most powerful being in his part of the galaxy. He had ruled over 15 billion citizens and 800 warships. He had believed his empire would last forever. Now he came to surrender everything. Behind Admiral Beek stood thousands of human soldiers, officers, and civilians. They had come from every colony, every station, every ship in the fleet. They wanted to witness this moment with their own eyes. And behind them, projected on massive screens all around the plaza, were the faces of the dead. 2,400 photographs arranged in neat rows. Each face had a name underneath it. Each name represented a life that had been stolen. The High Commander kneeled before Admiral Beek and presented the surrender documents. His hands were shaking. He could not meet the Admiral's eyes. "The Valrath Dominion surrenders unconditionally," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. "We accept all terms. We submit to human authority. We beg for mercy." Admiral Beek took the documents and examined them carefully. The terms were absolute. The Valrath military would be completely disbanded. Their weapons would be destroyed. Their territory would be divided and monitored by human forces. Their leaders would be tried for war crimes, but there was no genocide. No extinction. The Valrath people would survive. "Why?" the High Commander asked suddenly. He looked up at Admiral Beek with confused, desperate eyes. "After everything we did to you, after the massacre, after forcing you to become monsters, why do you let us live?" Admiral Beek was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the faces on the screens. So many young women. So many dreams that would never come true. "Because we are not you," he said finally. "We could destroy your entire species. We have the weapons. We have the will. No one in the galaxy could stop us." He shook his head slowly. "But if we did that, we would become exactly what you accused us of being. We would prove that humans are nothing more than killers. We would dishonor the memory of every woman who died believing that mercy matters." He stepped closer to the kneeling Valrath. "You will live. Your children will live. Your grandchildren will live. And for 1,000 generations, your people will remember this day. They will learn in their schools what happened when you murdered innocent prisoners. They will read about the empire that fell because of one act of pointless cruelty. They will carry this shame forever." His voice hardened. "Death would be an escape. We are not giving you that escape. You will rebuild in the shadow of what you destroyed. You will look at the stars that used to belong to you and remember that you lost everything because you could not show basic decency to helpless captives." The High Commander bowed his head and wept. Months later, Ambassador Park Yunzio addressed the reformed Galactic Council. The 17 species who had condemned humanity sat in uncomfortable silence as she walked to the center of the chamber. "You called us monsters," she began. Her voice echoed through the vast room. "You said we went too far. You demanded justice for the Valrath." She paused and looked around at the alien faces watching her. "Perhaps we did go too far. Perhaps history will judge us harshly. We accept that possibility." She straightened her shoulders. "But understand what you witnessed. For 18 months, humanity fought a war with restraint. We treated enemy wounded. We fed enemy prisoners. We followed rules designed to protect everyone, including our enemies. We did this because we believed in mercy. We believed that war did not have to mean savagery." Her eyes grew cold. The Valroth answered our mercy by murdering 2,400 women who had surrendered under a flag of peace. Medical workers, engineers, pilots, daughters and sisters and mothers. They killed them for entertainment and broadcast it to the galaxy. She pointed at the assembled aliens. And you said nothing? Not one species condemned the massacre. Not one species offered support. Not one species stood with us in our darkest hour. You watched and waited to see who would win. The chamber was completely silent. You made your choice that day. You showed us that the galaxy does not care about justice or mercy. The galaxy only respects power. So we showed you our power. We showed you what humanity becomes when we stop holding back. She began walking toward the exit. We are not asking for forgiveness. We are not asking for understanding. We are simply telling you what we are capable of when you push us past our limits. She stopped at the door and looked back one final time. The women you let die were the best of us. They represented everything good about humanity. Kindness, compassion, hope. Velrath destroyed all of that when they pulled their triggers. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. What you saw after the massacre was what remains when you take those things away. Pray you never see it again. Pray you never give us a reason to show that side of ourselves. Because now you know the truth. She opened the door. Humanity is not the friendly species you thought we were. That was a mask we chose to wear. The Velrath made us take it off. Remember that. Remember it well. She walked out, and the door closed behind her. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humans were welcomed with new respect wherever they traveled. Other species offered friendship and alliance without being asked. Trade agreements appeared that favored human interests. But underneath the politeness was something else: fear, understanding, the knowledge that the smiling humans, with their talk of peace and cooperation, were capable of terrible things when pushed too far. On a quiet colony world called New Sol, a memorial wall was built. 2,400 names were carved into black stone. People came from across human space to touch those names and remember. At the bottom of the wall, someone had carved a simple message. Well, they called us soft. They called us weak. They mistook our kindness for submission. They learned the truth too late. In the stars above, humanity continued its journey, changed forever by what they had done, carrying the weight of their choices, but never forgetting why they had made them. The murdered women were at peace now. Their killers would never know peace again, and the galaxy would remember this lesson for 10,000 years.